I've been storing these small pieces of white oak up in my attic for a few years. So let's get to making something. Question: can a piece be utilitarian, functional, and an heirloom? While I do some milling in the background, I'll tell you the story of this piece. I was recently in an antique store which specializes in more rustic pieces, and this little footstool caught my eye. I think the overall simplicity of the footstool is what intrigued me, but it was in really rough shape. It was cracked in several spots, and it had probably no less than 50 rusty nails barely holding it together. But there I was, staring intently at this little footstool, thinking it would be fun to capture the spirit and the intent of this little piece, but I think I can make it better. So while other shoppers looked at Hoosiers and farm tables, dressers, and all kinds of other big stuff, I sat there just staring at this little footstool, thinking, could I make it heirloom quality? Could I make it safer? Could I make it from a better material? Could I use joinery other than 50 rusty nails? I answered yes to all of these questions, so my next YouTube project video was born. In a rustic antique store, surrounded by other customers wondering who the weirdo is that keeps staring at a small footstool. So let's address this wood. At the start of this video, I told you that I had some white oak up in my attic. The guy who sold it to me told me it was white oak, so he must know that it's white oak. But white oak typically doesn't have that darker core area. And I can't find any photos online of white oak that looks like this. So maybe it's white oak, or maybe I'm willing to listen to anyone who adds a comment and tells me what this really is. Since I was running low on wood, I decided to resaw this piece to make the two aprons. I needed to add a few inches to this piece to make the top, and I probably spent too long trying to decide if I wanted to add to the outside edge or rip this piece in half and put the additional couple inches of wood into the center. In the end, I opted for adding it to the edge because I didn't have enough wood to even come close to matching that darker core area. Since people will actually stand on this piece, I'm using dowels to create a very strong joint between these two boards. Apply the right amount of glue, and then use my finger to spread it out instead of that little silicone brush that's sitting there for that exact purpose. Pounding in dowels is always very satisfying. I'm not sure why, it just is. There's no need to beat the boards too much with the hammer. Just put them in the clamps and let the pressure from the clamps close them to make the joint tight. And now is a good time to clean off any of the glue that may have squeezed out of that joint.
Good night, shop.
After the glue has dried, in this case overnight, I can unclamp the wood and move on to the next step. An open-end drum sander like this is a luxury. It's not a necessity. But it does drastically reduce the amount of time I have to hand sand. These two boards will be joined together to make one side. Since there isn't as much force on the sides as there is on the top, I decided to pull out another tool, the biscuit cutter, and use biscuits to join these two pieces of wood together. Biscuits aren't as strong as a dowel, but they just go in a little bit faster, and they are plenty strong for this application. After a few hours, the glue is dry. I can unclamp the boards and then cut them to the final length. I'm using the old school bow compass on this project in multiple locations to do a large radius. And for fun, I pulled out the old scroll saw to see if I could actually cut this radius in white oak with a scroll saw. It did work, but the white oak is very hard and I had to press pretty hard to get the saw to cut through it. Shop tip, you can pick up used scroll saws crazy cheap. And they can be useful even if you're not a scroll sawer. I print my drawings to a scale. In this case, it's 3 inches equals a foot. And then I use an architectural scale to transfer those measurements over to the actual board. Now I need to cut the edge of this board at an angle. I could do this cut with a jigsaw or on the bandsaw, but I've found a table saw will give me the straightest edge. But you need a tapering jig like this to make this cut on the table saw. And now I need to temporarily tape the cut piece back on to make some other cuts on the bandsaw. Woodworking tip: always keep your cutoffs handy. These cuts could be made with a jigsaw or a handsaw, but the bandsaw, I would say, is a little bit more accurate and makes it much faster. By now, you've probably figured out that I really like shooting video at the bandsaw. Sorry. Look, a Japanese torii gate. Cool, huh? And now I'm playing dental hygienist, and I'm cleaning out all the cracks and voids in this white oak. If it is actually white oak. I'm planning to fill the voids and cracks with epoxy. So if there's any voids that go completely through the board, you have to put tape on the back side to keep the epoxy from just running through. This is 2-part epoxy, so resin and hardener, and then I'm also adding a black dye to the epoxy so that it has a very, not quite black, but very smoky look to it. I prefer this over a clear epoxy just because I don't actually want to see into the void. The epoxy mix was exceptionally bubbly this day for some reason. I don't know why. So you can use a hairdryer, a heat gun, or even just a lighter to help reduce the number of bubbles. After the epoxy dries, I typically use a hand plane to start the smoothing process. Do you remember that tape trick? Well, this is what it looks like when I take the tape off. And now it's time to get back to all the other pieces and start to do the final sanding. while sanding the top, I realized that I needed to rip it in half to make the hand hole in it. This will all make sense in a few minutes. I decided to use the bandsaw for this cut versus the scroll saw. It's always good to have options, which actually means buy more tools. Let's clean the drum sander with this big eraser thingy and get back to sanding. So what makes something an heirloom? For me, I imagine that it's something that my children or my grandchildren will kind of argue over in the future. Someday that it'll be because that's something that I made and they want to keep it in the family. But I also think that a person can buy a handmade item and it becomes an heirloom within their family. So I think heirlooms are kind of a mixture of the item itself and the memories that kind of surround it. The person who possibly made it, or it could just be whoever purchased the piece from an artisan. And everybody, the family, everybody knew how much they loved that piece. So those memories make it an heirloom. A couple drops of super glue will set much faster than if I were just relying on the yellow glue. I will only need to clamp this for 5 or 10 minutes just to give the super glue time to fully cure. The glue up is set, so I'm going to use a wood rasp just to clean up the end of this board. This is a technique for adding the strength of dowels to joints that had the super glue put on, just to temporarily hold them in place and get it to set. I'll drill for the dowels and then glue those in place, and that's going to add a great deal of strength to this joint. More of the dental theme in this video. Since this is how most people will pick the footstool up, I'm adding a 1/4 inch round over detail. To attach the top to the sides, I decided to go with these decorative steel brackets. I liked the black color. I think that it ties into some of the hardware you'll see, and it does allow the top to expand and contract a little. That may happen in the changing of seasons. I'm doing a mock-up to decide where I actually want that cross support to be in relationship to the top and bottom of the footstool. And once I'm satisfied with the location, I can apply glue and then I'm using screws to secure it to the sides. Now, some people may ask, why screws versus some type of hidden joinery? And my thought is that I want to make this footstool so it can be repaired. If anything ever happens to it, can somebody tighten these screws to make it structurally sound again? Or if something gets damaged, can it be repaired? If I want this to be an heirloom, I want it to be repairable. I decided to do something unique for the front and back skirt pieces. These are cut nails, which also means that every head is unique, and that's actually what I was looking for. And the black steel ties in with those black angle brackets. And now for the finishing. For this project, what I decided to use is a oil varnish. In this case, it's the Watco Butcher Block oil. I've made the mistake in the past of brushing this on, and I was never really satisfied with the results. And then I actually read the directions, and they say to wipe it on. And I had much better results this time. I think it's just a fact that you need to wipe this into the grain. And if you use a brush, it comes out that some spots seem very shiny and others don't seem to match that, but I was very pleased with how it turned out on this piece. Recommend a light sand between coats with a maroon pad or 400 grit. Reading directions can sometimes be helpful. I let the piece sit overnight and then applied the second coat. I didn't do the swirly motion or anything. My intent was to apply a light second coat with just straight strokes, achieving a true satin finish. The photo in the upper left is the old footstool that inspired this build. Project debrief. The good. I really like this footstool. The size is right, it's functional, and I think it's attractive. I think I captured the spirit of the original footstool, but I did manage to make it better. The bad. I'm not totally happy with the epoxy work I did on this piece. I think it may have been cold or something, but I can still see bubbles in those little epoxy fills, and it annoys me. I like the contrasting colors in the wood, but I can also imagine that somebody who really likes straight grain, solid colors probably hates this piece, and I understand that. Everybody has their own likes and dislikes, but I really like it. The ugly. I'm just not wowed by the little black steel angle brackets that I use to attach the top. What I wish I would have done is cut some blocks out and maybe stained them black and then screwed the top on. I just don't like the look of the little brackets. Circling back to my original question, if a piece can be functional, utilitarian, and an heirloom, I think the answer is yes. And it doesn't have to be anything complicated. You don't have to have really fancy joints or anything. This is a pretty simple project. Great for beginners, great for a master craftsman. If they want to go wild on this, you can, but you don't have to. It doesn't have to be white oak, if that's what this is. It could just be pine. And any way you build it, someone's really gonna like this piece. So, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please subscribe, like, all that good stuff. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.